Welcome to today's explainer. I want to actually step into my clinical psychologist's shoes for this one, because we are unpacking a really fascinating piece of source material that basically diagnoses the reality of the modern world we're all navigating right now. You know, in my practice, I sit across from patients every single day who are struggling with a very specific, very modern malaise. I mean, they're successful, they're physically healthy, but they just feel incredibly burned out, chronically anxious, and uniquely drained. And the wildest part? The root of this isn't always some deep-seated trauma or a massive life crisis. Actually, very often, it's a fundamental issue of neurochemistry. We are living in an era defined by constant, absolutely frictionless access to reward. So, the premise we're diving into today doesn't just describe a specific country or a demographic, it describes a collective state of being. We are literally a nation ruled by a single neurochemical.
To really understand how an entire generation found themselves in this exact state, let me share a composite story of a typical client I might see. Let's call him Alex. Now, Alex is a great parent, a super dedicated professional. But every single night after the kids are finally asleep, he sits down on the couch intending to just quickly check his email, and suddenly it's 2 a.m., right? He's been endlessly scrolling through short-form videos, buying random things he definitely doesn't need, and consuming just these bite-sized pieces of outrage in the news. He tells me he feels numb, totally disconnected from his partner, and his sleep is, well, completely wrecked. He never actually set out to develop a behavioral dependency, but his story takes this massive abstract question and grounds it in a very relatable daily reality. Because let's be honest, we are all Alex to some degree, caught in a net we didn't even see being cast.
So what exactly are the mechanics driving this? Well, to truly empower ourselves, we need a simple understanding of the dopamine science that's at play here. Most people think dopamine is just the pleasure chemical, but clinically it's actually much better understood as a seeking chemical. It's that relentless drive that makes you want to look for the reward in the first place. Imagine your brain is like a seesaw, perfectly balanced between pleasure and pain. When we do something highly rewarding, like getting a massive barrage of social media likes, we press down really heavily on the pleasure side. But our brains crave balance, a state called homeostasis. So to level things out, your brain subtly starts adding little weights to the pain side. It's just a physiological mechanism trying to restore equilibrium after a huge spike.
Now, let's contrast our historical ideas of addiction with what we are actually facing today. In the past, when we talked about severe dependency, we were almost always discussing physical substances, right? Drugs, alcohol, things you physically ingest that violently tip that seesaw. But modern, everyday addiction, it is completely different. It's meticulously engineered. Think about it. Algorithms, infinite scrolls, gamified push notifications. These are tools deliberately designed by brilliant tech developers to hack those exact same dopamine pathways, but without you ever having to swallow a pill. The delivery system is literally just your smartphone. And the substance? It's novelty, it's validation, and it's distraction, fed directly to you at a mathematically optimized rate.
And this relentless machinery leads us to a really crucial clinical concept: tolerance. When we constantly flood our brains with this cheap, engineered digital dopamine, the seesaw adapts. The brain just leaves those heavy weights on the pain side permanently just to handle the daily flood. And as a result, your baseline level of dopamine actually drops. You need more and more screen time, more scrolling, more notifications just to feel a baseline level of normal or okay. And here's the kicker. When you finally put the phone down, the pleasure side empties out, leaving only those heavy pain weights. That is exactly why you feel that sudden spike of anxiety, irritability, or even a low-level depression when you're forced to disconnect. You are literally experiencing withdrawal.
Which perfectly explains the psychological blindness we have to our own digital consumption. We rarely view our screen time as a clinical issue, mostly because it's just so socially acceptable. It's completely integrated into our work and our social lives. But I want you to consider the genuine, visceral spike of panic you feel when you pat your pocket and realize you left your phone in another room, or when your battery hits 1% while you're out. That physical anxiety, that tight feeling in your chest, that is proof of a dependency that none of us consciously agreed to. We walked into this trap completely blind because the trap was perfectly disguised as convenience, productivity, and connection.
And this vulnerability, it spans an entire generation. It's a universal susceptibility. I often have to remind my clients that struggling to put your phone down does not mean you have weak willpower or some flawed character. Absolutely not. It is fundamentally an evolutionary mismatch. You see, you're walking around with an ancient brain that evolved for an environment of extreme scarcity. For our ancestors, finding calorie-dense food or novel information was incredibly rare and deeply necessary for survival, so the brain rewarded it heavily to keep us alive. But today, we've dropped that exact same ancient, scarcity-driven brain into a modern environment of overwhelming, perfectly engineered abundance. The system just gets overwhelmed. It's behaving exactly as it was designed to, just in the completely wrong era.
So, if we acknowledge that our neurochemistry has essentially been hijacked, how do we heal the seesaw? As a psychologist, my focus is always on actionable recovery, and there are 3 simple, proven methods to break these unhealthy behavioral cycles. The first one is dopamine fasting. Now, this doesn't mean becoming a monk and abandoning all technology forever. It just means taking a deliberate, time-boxed break from your specific triggering behavior. That could be a 24-hour detox from social media, or maybe a strict 30-day break from online shopping. The clinical goal here is simple. Give your brain enough time without that constant artificial stimulus to naturally remove those weights from the pain side and reset your baseline dopamine levels.
Okay, the second method is self-binding. Since we already know sheer willpower is pretty unreliable against engineered algorithms, we have to create our own physical and digital friction. This means using app blockers, changing your phone screen to grayscale so it's way less visually stimulating, or making a hard and fast rule to charge your phone in the kitchen overnight instead of right there on your nightstand. You physically bind yourself to prevent that autopilot behavior. And the third method? Embracing pain. This simply means engaging in effortful activities. Think a cold shower, a really difficult workout, or even deep, focused reading. These activities do the exact opposite of digital scrolling. They press on the pain side first, causing your brain to respond by releasing a natural, slow, and incredibly healthy wave of dopamine afterward, just to balance it out.
The ultimate takeaway here is actually profoundly hopeful. The neuroplasticity of your brain means you are never, ever permanently broken. Yes, the digital environment is brilliantly designed to capture and hold your attention, for sure. But by understanding the underlying neurochemistry of that seesaw, you can completely reclaim your agency. Are the mechanics of modern addiction operating in the background of your life right now? Probably. But now you know exactly how they work. You have the tools to observe your own habits, recognize when your neurochemistry is tilted, and take those deliberate steps to restore your own balance. At the end of the day, the power is entirely yours to decide how you want to engage with the dopamine-driven world around you.